u-matic.
Inspection at a single unit site in a year. On January 9th, Thomas Murley, our regional administrator, held a press conference during which he gave the perceptions of NRC from this extensive and, to my knowledge, unprecedented inspection coverage during this TMI-1 restart period. Dr. Murley commented that overall the performance was very good, especially the performance of the licensed operators and operations management was very strong. They demonstrated good knowledge, skills, and a safety-conscious attitude, which is important. There was generally good management involvement in plant activities. Equipment was generally well prepared for the startup. It was well maintained and thoroughly tested. The power escalation test program was used well for training and refamiliarization with power operations, which is important since the plant had not operated at power for such a long time. And the slow, deliberate pace of your startup program optimized the training benefit and refamiliarization of your operations group, as well as the rest of the plant. So those are really the positive comments, and I would like to add that in view of the very good performance and in view of the controversial nature of the plant restart, I think friends and family who gave support to the people at the plant are also to be commended for the support they gave to those people in a very stressful time. NRC, during the restart program, found areas in which improvements are still needed. Specifically, the people in the plant were not always sufficiently careful around the equipment. Now that sounds sort of simple, and it is, but it involves a philosophy of looking at the plant now in an operational phase and realizing that the actions of the workers in the plant at any time do have the potential, if not conducted carefully enough, to degrade a system or to result in an unplanned challenge to some safety system. Secondly, the overall implementation of procedural controls at the plant needs to be improved. And this is always an area where a lot of discussion occurs and there can be a variety of opinions. But when you look at the controls needed at a nuclear plant and to achieve the very high degree of safety and assurance of safety that everyone is striving for, you need really a balance of very well-trained, well-qualified, conscientious workers, appropriate supervision, and a procedure to back up that individual's skills and talents and supervision. This procedure has some of the additional areas we're looking into are the depth of reviews of problems at the plant, especially relative problems of perhaps relatively minor safety significance, but yet of potential significance, for which we're looking for somewhat of a more inquisitive and maybe even a pessimistic viewpoint when you're looking to make sure you've gotten to the bottom of a problem. That I have is the philosophy of our inspection program really recognizes that the return to normal for this plant, for a number of reasons, many reasons, will be very, very slow. Those who operate Unit 1 at TMI must realize that this is a great challenge to them. It will continue to be an ongoing challenge and an area of high visibility. and the NRC inspection program will be more extensive at TMI-1 than at other sites. Organizationally, as of January 10th, has reassumed the position of Senior Resident Inspector, TMI Unit 1, chain of command. So organizationally, it's pretty much normal. I guess one exception is my plant load. Staffing-wise, we will have 4 full-time resident inspectors. The normal staffing for a single unit plant is 2 resident inspectors. We're not there yet from Region 1. Basically, I have 2 inspectors who work for me in Region 1, and they are the regional office in King of Prussia and the island. We expect to resolve this in the near future and have our full-time staff of 4 resident inspectors at TMI-1. Now, we have several reasons for this increased staffing. One is takes into account the fact that TMI-1 is the only in the B&W design and expand it. And to us, the most efficient way to do that is to increase the full-time resources on the site. Second of all, our inspection program, I previously mentioned, will be more extensive than at other sites. And we are doing some innovative things with the inspectors. Need a break from time to time. We need to rotate them to other sites. We need to develop people with their level of expertise on the site, so eventually if in Bethesda, this team will look at overall management controls on the facility. This, instead of once per year, it's being done twice in the first year of restart operation at TMI-1. It shift inspectors 12 to 24 hours a day. The performance appraisal team inspection will take a system-based approach. It's called a safety system functional inspection approach, where they really take 1 or 2 systems and completely wring out those systems. They look at the design, the initial design of the system, the control of all the modifications since the initial plant design was completed, focusing on a system, and we found that's useful in that rather than just looking in general at programs, we're looking at programs as they relate to hardware in the plant. The first of these inspections will be conducted assessments of the licensee performance, and there are 3 of those planned within the first essentially 12 months, and one at the 12-month point. We'll take a full scope look at the performance at this facility in all functional areas normally done for operating plant. In my section, another unique thing we're doing with our inspection program is the issuing of a weekly status report. This status report is a factual report which is to provide NRC management and public with highlights of TMI-1 activities. We did it throughout the restart. We continue to do it. It's usually but really more recently in evaluating events at other B&W plants, the NRC has found that the B&W design is a little more challenging to operate than other designs. This is a belief at the highest levels of NRC management. And where we stand now is that all designs were licensed to the same requirements, but the recent events, and none of these involve TMI, are occurring at somewhat of a disproportionately high rate at the B&W plants. At the end of January, Vic Stello, our executive director for operations, the senior man in the commission below the commissioners themselves, announced this reassessment program to evaluate operational data for plants and determine if additional improvements are needed. The B&W Owners Group, which is really a utility organization of owners of the plants, is to have a leadership role in the industry portion of the program. And the NRC is coordinating this out of the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation. The study will have to key on individual plant differences and also consider the extent to which procedures and training impact B&W plant events. And in fact, in our restart effort, any information from another B&W plant that we could get, we looked at to the extent we could from TMI, and we were somewhat encouraged in that some of the design features that contributed to the events at the other plants are actually the TMI-1 design is such that the events really wouldn't have happened in our current assessment. They wouldn't have happened at TMI-1 the way they evolved at the other plants. So initially we're somewhat encouraged with TMI-1 as far as how it will stack up when you consider individual plant differences. However, the program may, when it gets to the end, place additional requirements on TMI-1. And it's an extensive program, and it is far too early to really tell if there will be any impact on TMI-1. Finally, I'd like to mention some challenges for the future. I have 3, not because there are only 3, but 3 seems to be the typical number that people use, and I came up with 3. One is to avoid complacency. The performance during the TMI-1 restart program was very good, and it was very encouraging. It's also true, and it was obvious that a lot of preparation was put into the restart, and the organization was essentially keyed up, and as it should have been. The plant needs to maintain a high level of professionalism and readiness and not slip into any degree of complacency. And that's simple to say, but really hard to carry out, because when you operate a nuclear plant, most of the time operating the plant, and especially hopefully at TMI, is steady state, full power operations, things running smoothly. But by the same token, that plant has to be ready at any time in terms of the equipment and the people for any one of a number of events that are really expected to be very low probability events and may never happen within the life of the plant. But yet, you always have to be ready for it. And therefore, that's why I feel as the plant has gone through the successful restart program and now continues to operate very well and smoothly, that the complacency be avoided. And we haven't, as far as I can tell, really seen any signs of complacency yet. Next, the utilities in their striving for excellence and striving to improve the safety of the plant, as well as the NRC and the way we do inspections, the way we focus our activities, needs to focus on risk reduction. I mentioned earlier the plant has to be ready for at all times for events, each of which is very low probability. We need to work on quantitative means of evaluating risk, looking at the features of the system that contribute most to the risk, no matter how low probability that risk seems to be, and evaluate the need for ongoing improvement, focus in training programs, and procedural improvements, as well as hardware and design improvements, really in a risk-based approach. And third, It's one thing that's needed to be done to somewhat of a greater extent than has in the past, or needed with maybe perhaps just a little greater emphasis, is to look at the whole plant. Not only at safety systems, but at non-safety systems, what their failures can do, what impacts can the non-safety systems have on the overall plant, the way they can challenge the safety systems, the way they can put the plant into a transient. Look at the whole plant and reduce the number of plant trips and really the overall challenges to the safety systems. And if you minimize the number of times the plant safety systems are challenged, as well as do everything possible to make those safety systems as ready as they can be, as well as the people ready to manipulate the plant to evaluate conditions and respond to an event, we can continue improved safety within the industry. That's the end of my prepared remarks, and we're open for questions now, either to Rich, the Senior Resident Inspector, or myself, and need not be limited to what I've spoken about here. The floor is open. Yes, sir.
Early in your presentation, you started talking about getting back to normal operations. And the connotation I drew from that is that you would be reducing the extensive staffing that you've had here during the restart and the preparation for restart. And you mentioned the date of January 10th for that. I think if those words that you used are quite what you might have used?
I can't remember exactly the words I used, but it doesn't match.
Let me see if I can help Randy out here.
Okay. Let me clarify, and then we'll move to what Rich says. We had really, in my mind, unprecedented staffing level and attention level and inspection coverage during the restart program. On January 10th, we reduced that coverage to less than was done during the restart program, but still significantly more than a typical plant, and we foresee the coverage remaining at more than a typical plant indefinitely.
Before June of '85, look at it this way. Forget about the restart staff. That was a special idea, an intense review to really get into their pants, so to speak, and we did. Okay, boy, did we did. I was beat at the end of the 3 months, and I'm sure your husbands and wives or whatever the case were, our relatives were beat after those 3 months. Look at it from May of '85. There was only 2 resident inspectors on site, myself and Skip. Okay, the level of review now is we're at least 3 on site, barring leave, minor hours, days for annual leave, but there's a commitment on the region's part to at least provide a 3rd resident, and by, I envision, April 30th, or I'm sorry, March 30th, April 1st, we'll have 4 residents, okay, which is somewhat unprecedented for a single unit, single utility site. The only other case I can think of that has 4 residents is Indian Point, and that's because Indian Point 2 is operated by one utility, and Indian Point 3 is operated by the other. So for a single unit, single utility, or single licensee site, this is, I think, unprecedented to have this coverage. And I think there's good reasons for it. And I just wanted to focus on the unique aspects that Randy mentioned. Let me back up to another. I'm going to get into a little bit of philosophy here. At the end of in June 3rd, I think it was June 4th or 5th, they reached 100% power. And I said to myself, my God, it's over. Finally, we're at this plateau. No more whole point memos, no more whatever. But when that thought quickly left me, okay, when it's really just the beginning for GPU. It's really just the beginning for all of us, the NRC. I envision GPU passing a very significant test. Okay, it's sort of like the little hump before Mount Everest. Or maybe there are a few other humps. I think there are a few other humps. It's called the Pat and the Salps in the ensuing year, okay? But what's the big hump that they got to get through? And it was one of the key themes that you talked to me the last time I was here in front of this organization. And we talked about GPU's credibility and restoration of that credibility in the public's eyes. It's not going to happen overnight, okay? You're not going to make believers out of the public, the interveners, or what have you, okay? It was a very favorable, the whole restart program was very favorable. But one significant thing is that all of the too hard modifications of making things safety great by cycle 6 startup, which is the next startup after refueling, we're going to have to verify those. We're going to have to see how they performed in getting those modifications implemented, okay? It was very easy at the hearing to say, we'll put this improvement in, and reasonably so, because of expense, because of doing a good job, the safety grade deferments had to wait until the next cycle. No one envisioned that startup would take till 1985, okay? And so there still is that big hump of getting through that next cycle, and it's a workload in that next cycle. A normal refueling outage would be 3 to 4 months, but because of all the extra work, significant fire protection improvements, making the emergency feed water system, which system you've all heard about, fully safety grade. Okay, those modifications, commitments to the licensing board. It's not over, obviously, and there's still a big hump that they're going to have to get through. The signs are encouraging. I really do. The signs are encouraging. And those signs, I think that the key things that Randy mentioned, I'm really dragging out your question, but let me just philosophize a little more here. I think the two key things that Randy hit on is the investment in training that the utility put in. Boy, if that didn't come through, I don't know what did. You remember Randy talk about the challenges, the people working in the spaces, the challenges to safety-related systems. The so-called thing, I remember one incident where the guy plugged in something to the cabinet, the belt buckle, okay? They plugged an instrument into the cabinet, caused a spike in the integrated control system. The integrated control system started to respond. If you look at the operator response, it was excellent. The licensed operators knew what they were doing. They were familiar with the plant. People from around the country were just absolutely amazed at how these people who had never operated the ICS system, new operators, were able to take manual control. And it's a complex system. Believe you me, it's a complex system. Okay, I had people say to me, I know how that system works, and if you can get operators to control a transient. The most recent example was the loss of auto power in the integrated control system a couple weeks ago. RCS pressure got within 15 pounds of causing a reactor trip. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about avoiding safety system challenges, which the operators came through on very strongly. Very strongly. I can't emphasize that more. The other good aspect was the adequacy of the overall program to identify problems. And that's part of the just beginning that I'm talking about. There are residual technical issues that they need to resolve. Those relief valves that you hear screaming on a full power trip, okay, keep opening, okay, on the post-trip response. They shouldn't. They should just open and shut. When you keep opening and shutting them, you're challenging them, okay? You're challenging them, you're going to cause one to fail, and now you've got a main steam line break. And analyze the vent, but it challenges the plant. It challenges the operators. Okay, so that's another key point of getting back to it's not over, it's just the beginning. Those issues need to be resolved. More questions? I got a little carried away, but I was kind of silent for a half hour.
I'm sorry, I still need... Okay.
Go ahead.
Thanks for asking about the training and the use for a training ground, because I do need to clarify that. Our third inspector assigned to the site will be a fully qualified inspector with roughly 15 years nuclear experience, over 2 years with the agency, and who has been through the entire NRC inspector training program, including a certification board. So he will be a fully qualified inspector in every respect. The fourth will be, yes, someone who's still in his training program as an NRC inspector, but who is well into the program. And we have done that at sites in the past, assigned and which have
details of how they perform, and positive and negative was identified. Okay, and I think we found more positive than we did negative. I think they passed a pretty stringent test, especially that flavor of getting these people from outside the country, outside the region, to come in and give us an opinion as to what they thought.
I have a question. How do you feel, aside from being involved in the NRC, how do you feel about the future of nuclear power? I know this probably was a giant step for it, permission to restart, but I also know that the costs have become so exorbitant to start up new plants. And then you just mentioned also that there are other companies applying for licenses. I mean, this hasn't
Putting plants on the line. They've already applied for it. In the 1980s, is the plants that have already started are starting to come on the line now.
That's okay. That's okay.
They've been constructed. The applications have been in for years. Shoreham is the worst test case for 10 years, I think, or more than that. And that's what you're saying. I don't know. I think nuclear power it has a very viable use in our society. We obviously are not going to eliminate that. I think it's up to 15% of our power source overnight. Nuclear plants, I think, are going to be around for the next. They're designed for 40 years.
I agree that there should be more nuclear power plants.
Well, you're putting me in an awkward position as a regulator to.
Well, I mean, for the benefit of the country, right?
You know, that's a judgment call that you've got to look at a lot of things. You've got to look at the financial aspects. I really don't know whether it is more expensive to operate nuclear plant versus a coal-fired plant.
Not operating, just building them.
Or building them. You know, and with coal-fired plants, you're talking about extra measures for sulfur control and the emissions control, and a lot of people can play numbers with that. You can play, you know, how much does it cost to construct and how much does it cost to operate, and you amortize it. And I'm not an accountant. I really don't know. I think it was a significant step for GPU, and I think they represented the industry substantially well in what they did. And I think to a certain extent that they're doing a lot of things that perhaps they're leading the industry in. Getting back to your question, sir, about TMI being a test case for the design problems of B&W plants, I've been pleasantly surprised when I looked at the recent events at Davis-Besse, the loss of feed water, and the most recent one at Rancho Seco on the loss of integrated control system, and I compare what has happened at those plants, and I look at the design at TMI, I'm very encouraged. I'm not saying that there won't be action items coming from those, there won't be lessons learned, generic lessons learned from those events that GPU may have to incorporate, but I think they're well along in their improvements that they put in. They're not there. They're not perfect. You know, there's still problems out there. But I think they're farther along in some areas than other B&W plants. And in other areas, they may be lagging. It'll work. Okay, we look at it. Will it work if this happens, if that happens, if the design-based events happen? Okay, so we have a unique perspective, and that's the kinds of things that I want to enter into. I want to get my two new guys. When he comes in March, he will at least know what integrated control system means, non-nuclear instrumentation, some of the unique titles for these plants. And I'm really looking forward, and we can really do a bang-up job. We can really implement the minimum and basic inspection program that we can get to, and we can also help the region out by doing some supplemental inspections that are really not required every year, but we can do some supplemental inspections and provide that unique plant-specific knowledge that the region has been changed. He generally knows what the system is, but the 4 residents really know how that system functions from a safety viewpoint. And there's a lot of subtle systems, like the support systems for the emergency feed water system. It's not so obvious which ones are the safety grade versus which ones are the non-safety grade. And I told you, we're safety engineers, so we think in terms of the safety design. So that's there. Recurring maintenance tickets or recurring maintenance jobs on a particular valve. Why on that particular valve? We're trying to get into those kinds of questions.
What?
Tell Hank I avoided that one.
Our primary responsibility is to the general public, and yes, it's tough on the workers at the plant, and you know it's tough on the workers at the plant. But your question is...
When will you stop picking on minor violations and things like that?
Uh,
How long
uh,
does TMI have to wait until they can just have the normal amount of inspectors there?
For the foreseeable future, TMI-1 will never have the normal amount of inspectors.
Why?
We've been.
Why
we-
must we do
I
something?
am trying to finish a sentence. Maybe never was not a good word to use. For the foreseeable future, we've assigned 4 full-time inspectors. So those are full-time positions, and staffing can always be reevaluated. But right now, for the foreseeable future, we see 4 full-time inspectors. No, we don't. No.
Can't you guinea pig them for a while?
Well, TMI-2 had the accident. We feel that we as NRC are still really working hard to regain our credibility with the public and the government agencies in the area. We don't feel our inspection at TMI is overkill. Reasonable people may differ. We do realize we're putting a lot of stress on the people at the plant. I think the plant has to learn to live with the increased NRC interest and the increased public interest. It's just isn't going to go away. Well, it depends on if you assume it's overkill or not. If it's no, it wasn't designed to overkill. We don't feel it's overkill now. It is a special inspection program, and we are assigning additional people because Region 1 initiative, it's our only being
Just
TMI
1.
Yes, I'm referring to Unit 1.
Yeah.
How many NRC personnel are on site for Unit 2? Do you have any number for that one by any chance?
About 15.
Now those are not all Region 1 people. They're NRR,
Talk about
TMI program office.
talk about inefficiencies. Now, I'm not saying that. Don't get me wrong, or don't quote me
Well,
that.
they had the accident, we didn't.
You know, they're a major impact, but they're performing a public service. They're a major impact on.
U-matic.